Hey Monkey fans, thanks for tuning in today. On this part of our Monkey build, we have a TB Parts oil cooler and the associated kit components that go with it, and we're going to install it on the 2019 Honda Monkey. So we're not really too sure. The instruction sheet that comes with this is essentially in a different language and there's not much info on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to attack this piece by piece and then we're going to figure it out. So the concept of an oil cooler is kind of unique, especially on an air-cooled bike. Oil coolers are exactly what they say they are. It takes the engine oil and it circulates it through an element to get airflow to cool it, just like a radiator would for a cooling system on the motor, except with oil. You might be asking, why do I need an oil cooler for my motorcycle? Well, that answer is pretty simple. One, it's an air-cooled motor. So air-cooled has always been the name of the game for small bore Hondas, and it's really not necessary to water cool them. However, if you're pushing the bike a little bit harder, or you have a big bore kit, or maybe you've upgraded your motor components, pushing a little bit more horsepower, perhaps you have an intake, you have an exhaust just like I have, that all contributes to the air-fuel mixture running a little bit more lean, or you can control your air-fuel mixture. So with that, you don't want the motor to get too hot, because if your air-fuel mixture isn't rich enough, for a better example, if you don't have enough fuel going into your motor, then you're going to be running hot, hotter than it would from the factory. So to offset that, and just for a little bit of insurance, putting an oil cooler on the bike will help cool the motor overall. The bike isn't set up for an oil cooler that it didn't come with or anything, so that's what these parts and pieces are for. They're going to help us retrofit this oil cooler kit onto the Monkey air-cooled 125cc engine. So the first step that I'm going to take, and according to the paper that came with it, is to install the CNC tappet cover replacement cap, and we're going to install the long stud into the cylinder head. And basically this is a unique stud that has a channel in it, and what this is probably meant to do is return or feed the oil from the pump assembly in the motor to the oil cooler element. Okay, I'm going to interrupt the install here and show you something that I found that I think is pretty important to know. So this kit is designed for the MSX 125, which we know as the Grom here, and with that they have a different style of fender. So what I found, as you can see, the monkey fender comes pretty close to the head here, and the kit is supposed to install like this onto the bottom studs, and as you can see, there's just no way that's going to happen with that fender there. You know, and this is meant to go right there. It's not lining up. It doesn't make sense here. So what we're going to do is put it on top, on the top head studs, which I feel is the way it's supposed to go, but the directions or the one piece of paper that comes with the kit say otherwise. The problem I see here is that the inlet for the valve cover oil return is right here on the other side of the bracket. So there's no way we're going to be able to get that hose into there, although this would make sense to where this goes up here. So what I'm going to try to do is bend this bracket up, which would put the oil cooler more or less up here, which is a place where I think I'd probably rather have it anyways, because it just looks a little bit more tucked up and looks a little neater, not just out there kind of by the fender. So I'm going to take it over to the vise and I'm going to try to bend it up to get it more straight. So we're going to take this Z-bend down here and straighten that out and get this located in a little bit better of a spot. Just to make sure I'm covering all my bases here, I wanted to see if the hose, if the valve tappet cover inlet mounted backwards from what the directions say would work. That would allow me to put this mount on the top here. It seems that it just misses it, which is unfortunate, because that would have been quick and easy and I wouldn't have had to bend the mount. So the only place where I see it interferes is right here on the throttle body inlet, or the intake there, and it's so close. And I gotta think that, you know, if you really wanted to have it mounted this way, which I see is a good way to mount it too, because the oil's gonna flow down and drip down into there. So I feel that it should be mounted this way anyways, but it looks like it just misses the mark a little bit. And I'll see for sure. I'll put the bolts in here and I'll see if I can't get the other side threaded in, and that way we know for certain if this setup would work or not. Yeah, it's just, you can see the gap right there. This bolt head is just a little bit too long, with this fitting a little bit too wide. So that's unfortunate, because that would have been a cool setup, cool way to do it, kind of package it a little bit neater. So we're just going to go ahead and bend that bracket, but I gotta figure if you're crafty enough to do this, you can probably notch out this inlet here and get it mounted in that position if you wanted to as well. We're just going to take the non-cutting into metal route, just bend the bracket. Okay, as we move into the installation process, there's a couple of key things that I need to point out to you. The first and foremost is the mount that comes with the kit. It's not ideal for the Honda Monkey. So what that means is I highly modified this mount from how it was delivered in the box. And the reason I did that is because I tried it several different ways on the cylinder head. There was really no good way except for mounting the whole cooler underneath the bike, like close to the ground, underneath, you know, the fender area, and it was just going to get a ton of debris and a ton of dirt down there. And I just didn't like the idea of it being that low. So what I did is took the mount and I bent it and contorted it and ground away at it and fit it to where it will now sit on the bike exactly where I want it. So I can't say that this kit is going to come delivered from TB Parts the way it's going to be on my bike. So keep that in mind, that when you get this kit, I believe this kit's designed for the Grom, obviously, because the box says MSX 125. So with that in mind, we have to keep in mind that we might have to do some modifications. But if there is a kit that TB Parts have that's specific for the Monkey, then that's what we're going to want to go with here, obviously, because this mount's going to be a little bit different if that's the case. So I feel that this mount was made for the Grom, and maybe I just didn't get the right kit. So definitely check with TB Parts on that if you're going to go this route. So for me though, bending this bracket up the way I did, I basically custom remade this bracket to put the oil cooler where I want it. So that's what's happened here, and it won't fit up on your bike like this out of the box. So that's one thing. And the second thing is that for the head stud that we have to remove, I tried my hardest to get this head stud out using the jam nut method, which is what the factory manual says you should do. I just couldn't get it. So maybe my nuts, that's funny. So maybe my nuts that I was using for lock nutting it and turning it with that jam nut method, maybe they'd be better if they had some serrated edge to them, or if they had a little bit thinner of a profile. I don't know. So anyways, I probably could have gotten it, and I'm sure some of you out there will get it, but I couldn't. So what I had to do was basically take a channel lock or a vice grip and just crank this thing out and ruin the threads. So I had concern about this before I did this, and my concerns were eased by the fact that this OEM bolt from the dealership from Honda is only $2 or something. So I'm not too worried about it. So if I put the bike back to stock form, I go and buy a $2 something head stud, call it a day, put it back in brand new, and just toss this old one. So that's the other part of it that's going to be a little bit heartbreaking. So you basically have to destroy your stud, and to mount the cooler how I mounted it, you're going to have to reconfigure the way the mount came with the Morin oil cooler. And basically what I did is I ground and I pounded and repainted it. So basically we want to mount it up to the two studs there in the front top, and the problem area was right here. The tappet cover return, I don't even know what you call it, but anyways, this cover that returns the oil, it just hit this bracket big time. There's no way it was going to fit, so I had to grind it and round it all out and just get it to where it went around that. And I have it turned around here backwards so you can see where I'm talking about, but I'll put it on the way that it's going to be finalized, and I'll show you a little bit easier. So the bracket goes on this way, and you can see right here was where it was interfering. So I had to grind that area out first, and then I had to straighten out this bend. So this bracket was bent in a specific way, and I highlighted that earlier. So what we did is just bent it all up and put it basically where I wanted it, and it's going to put the oil cooler up here. So that's what I wanted, and it took a lot of work to get there. Also, it's worth noting that the roundness, these were squared before, and they kind of hit the fins on the cylinder head here. So I rounded these off a bit, and with that got a little bit more clearance. So that's something else that I did that's worth taking note of. Okay, so what we're going to do now is put this all together, kind of pre-assemble it, and then get it on the bike. So the first thing I'm going to do is hook up the oil lines to this, and the oil lines are right here. So the kit comes with the banjo bolts, and along with it these sealing washers. So we want to make sure that obviously you have a washer on each side before you put it into the oil cooler to ensure it's sealed. And I'm just going to put these on there loose because I know there's going to be some adjustment when I do get it on the bike. We go ahead and get both sides on. And like I said, it's gonna need to find a final resting place when on the bike. And then we're gonna go ahead and get our mount on there. So we know it's gonna go like that. And the kit comes with 2 screw sizes. We're going to use the smaller of those. And the other is a longer screw with a option for a spacer. It also comes with some spacers. And if we want the oil cooler to sit a little bit higher, we'll just switch to those longer bolts with the spacers. We're going to go ahead and fit it on here. Obviously we know how it's going to go based on what I told you before. And it just slips over these 2 studs. I'm keeping the factory washer in between the cylinder head and the bracket. And I'm going to take the OEM Acorn nuts. Going to reuse those, of course. Thread those on. Now there's not too much thread left on these Acorn nuts, so that's a little bit of a concern to me too. But we're going to go ahead and be careful when we torque those down. And now we're just going to see how we want our hoses configured. So we're going to go on the top, behind, and then to the front here. Okay, so now the line that goes to the bottom bolt is going to use this provision that they gave us in the Morin kit. And then just make sure your copper sealing washer is in there. Now we're to the point to where we need to tighten the cylinder head nuts here. And the torque on these, the factory specified torque is going to be 18 foot-pounds. And it's meant to be done in a crisscross pattern. I stupidly left my torque wrench in our other shop, so I'm going to go ahead and do these by feel tonight, and then we'll let the engine warm up a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and re-torque them again. So the final steps are going to be to connect the hoses to the cylinder head. And basically I've left all the hose connections somewhat loose to be able to get these hoses how I want them. So we can tell that these hoses down here, this one's pretty cut and dry. It's really not gonna matter too much. Yeah, I know I want it pointed this direction. So I also want it pointed down so it drains. I don't want to have a loop in there that causes oil to sit. So we'll go ahead and get that there. And then this one, I'm going to curve it so it points straight down. And that way it allows me to route it next to this other hose. What I'll probably do is wrap these together. Okay, so now we're up here on the top where the oil cooler is. We're just going to go ahead and tighten these down. Just to point out, I have the man-in-the-box intake on here, and there's no way that this oil cooler would have fit in this location with the stock airbox. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, moving on to the last step here. It's going to be to tighten up these bottom mount bolts. I do a lot of off-road riding, but the vibration that this engine puts out, it's probably a good idea to even maybe throw some Loctite on these once you're sure on where you want it to go, or maybe even a lock washer, which would be a less intrusive option. Okay, so I'm pretty good with that. And the cool thing is, if you don't like exactly where it's sitting, you can kind of bend that mount a little bit and get that cooler exactly where you want it. So the last thing I'm going to do, just to keep things clean and tidy, is put a nice little Velcro tie down. I get these from IT related work. They use them to tie up network cables and stuff. So I'm going to put these two protective sleeves together so the hoses don't rub on both the mount on the inside hose and each other for the outside hose. I'm just going to wrap them up. This little Velcro strip makes it really easy to wrap them up there and keeps them right there pulled together, and that way they won't be flopping around, nor will they be in danger of my feet or anything snagging them. So that's it.